Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I think this is a very interesting topic we've got, and I'm very pleased that Catherine Palmer, who's the General Counsel of KellyDeli, is to chair it. The company she works for is an innovative food company which operates in over 11 countries. And separately, and for a long time, Catherine has been at the heart of Franco-British relations, whether at the French Chamber of Commerce or as president of the English and Wales section of the Franco-British Lawyers Society. We were delighted when Catherine came onto the board of the Franco-British Data Society last month. And with that, I'll hand you all over to her capable care. Catherine.
Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon, everybody. Just in terms of a bit of housekeeping, you will have 3 presentations of about 15 minutes each, or maximum 15 minutes, followed by questions, and we intend to end at 3 o'clock on the dot. Please also be aware that this session will be recorded. The topic that we have today is data, AI, and the built environment. And more particularly, we'll be concentrating on women's safety, buildings, and the public, and managing waste. I'm delighted to introduce 3 speakers. I will introduce them all to you now rather than one at a time. In the order in which they will speak. So Mike Saunders on the panel is the CEO and founder of Commonplace and has been a digital pioneer for over 25 years. Commonplace is a company which was set up to use citizen science to approach and engage communities, originally in planning projects, but now is involved in much wider projects such as safer streets. So that links with our title of safety generally. Our second speaker today will be Andrew Eland, founder of Diagonals. The mission of Diagonals is to improve the quality of life for those living in cities. Andrew has built software for many years, including leading organizations behind Google Maps Mobile. And because he lives what he preaches, you might be interested to know that Andrew lives in London in a 19th century house, which has been retrofitted to passive house standards. Your third speaker today is Stuart Stock. Stuart started his professional life as a qualified accountant, but then moved into IT, and after a number of leadership roles in IT, he is currently CIO for Veolia UK and Ireland. He will be speaking to us on data strategy in a large organization, and in particular in the management of waste. These are your 3 speakers today. Over to you, Mike.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Catherine. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Commonplace does and where we've come from and how we work. And I think what we do links in with across a number of the themes that Catherine's outlined. So as she said, I'm co-founder of Commonplace, and we are the UK's leading digital engagement platform focused on places. We're a social business, and we have impact goals baked into our company incorporation. So that means that we're really focused on the outcomes of the projects that we host discussions about, as well as the discussions themselves. And we've been lucky enough to gather a team of urbanists, local government specialists, communications experts, technologists and data scientists to help make this happen. Our purpose is about powering positive participation. So the way we do that is connecting people to the places that they live, work and play, with the aim of accelerating positive change through collaboration. As all of you know, I'm sure, cities, towns, the places that we live, neighbourhoods, are where our lives happen. And if we can get these places right, then there's a huge number of sometimes quite large problems that can be solved, certainly if you add up all of the neighbourhoods together, including safety, adaptation to climate change, and even how we live in a post-pandemic world. And we're seeing some really interesting trends at the moment. I think there is a significant change in public attitude to some of these big issues. I mean, there was a study recently about the public's attitude in the US to climate, and there's suddenly been a shift. People want to do something. And secondly, we've seen that the pandemic has created a great sense of connection between people in their community and a much greater desire to influence it. This is a survey that we conducted last year, and it indicated that over 3/4 of people want to be directly connected and have a greater influence in the place that they live through planning. So how does Commonplace help all of that? Well, it's really, really simple. We generally speak and get people to talk about the place they live. They can use their phone, mark a place on the map that you see here on the left-hand side. We call this our neighbourhood heat map, and talk about their ideas to change it. We also can support people presenting plans for change, and the public can indicate what they feel about those plans in a very visual way. And all of this is supported by a powerful analytics dashboard and set of tools which interprets the feedback into meaningful data that can be used to drive change. And our tools are above all easy to use and focus on energising a slightly different kind of local democracy. So our bread and butter works very much with local governments and property developers, and we help them to plan their cities and or developments. And we've been really successful in doing that. So over 4 million people have engaged in over 1,000 projects. And particularly during COVID, we made our platform available for free for councils to conduct public conversations about adapting to the pandemic, and had a really incredible response with over 500,000 people engaging in those projects. So we've kind of proven that this kind of engagement works at scale, and we're now thinking about how to apply that to other issues. And the first one that we turned our attention to was the safety of the streets. And we've actually partnered with UN Women and an organisation called Reclaim These Streets to create an offer to local authorities. And what we're trying to do is to help them to create a dialogue that does a few things. Firstly, understands areas and issues where women and girls feel unsafe. Secondly, create some data that can help the local authority to respond to those. And thirdly, actually publicises and raises the profile so that men can see more clearly what is going on in their neighbourhoods and can adapt their behaviour to make sure that women don't feel unsafe in their places that they live. So this is an example of the heat map that we've launched for Islington Council on safer streets, and the technology allows them to drop a pin on the map and to say something about that place that they've marked. So in this case, we've adapted the kind of questionnaire for them to talk about the safety specifically. And by having an in-depth understanding of the problem through this data, you have an evidence base, you have awareness, you have the ability to understand, create insights, and then implement solutions and inform the wider community about your strategy. So the beauty of working with communities like this is that it's hugely flexible. And I just wanted to tell you a couple of very brief stories to explain how the whole thing works longitudinally. So this is an example of Lewisham Council, who wanted to create a regeneration programme in Catford. What would normally happen would be that they would appoint an architect who would draw up very detailed plans over some months, and only when they'd finished doing that would they involve the community in any discussion about them. What they wanted to do, they being Lewisham Council, was actually to start from the ground up. And so they launched a conversation on Commonplace, which lasted for 2 years before any architects were employed, created a huge amount of data about Catford and what the community thought about the place, their aspirations for it, their concerns, and so on. And we were then able to play back some of this data, which you can see in the middle here, showing the community the priorities that they had raised, but also then feeding into the brief for the designers of the master plan. And not only did it feed into the kind of formal design process, but on the right-hand side, you can see the news feed, which every Commonplace conversation has. And this is showing that one of the things the council found, because it was literally kind of flashing red on our map, was that the accessibility of Catford Station was terrible. And they were able to fix that accessibility problem very quickly and actually at very low cost, and then shout back to the community about the fact that they not only listened and not only fed their ideas into a longer term master plan, but have actually managed to fix something in a short period of time for them to use more effectively. Our customers also use Commonplace for a huge variety of different types of planning applications, and in particular to measure social value. So this is an example of developers, Eland, which is a housing association, and Night Dragon, which is a private developer. And they wanted to deliver a long-term community outreach programme involving the community, starting from the very beginning to prioritise aspects of the development to meet the community needs, and then to measure how well they were doing once the development is being constructed, and then post-occupancy once people are actually living in it. And you can also use Commonplace at a citywide level. This is a project called Park Power, which we ran across London, asking Londoners to indicate what they thought about the future of their local park. And we used the feedback from this project to create a series of parkologies, which you can see along the bottom there, combining both geographical and type data to create these different types of parks that London hosts. And this data is now being used by local authorities who are thinking about the way that they plan green spaces and parks in the future. So the other big area is climate, and we're really, really interested in the way that climate and environment how local authorities and members of the community can interact together around climate. Many councils in the UK have climate emergencies, and we've worked with them to extend citizen assemblies online. And we've also worked very hard with a large number of councils actually to create impactful changes through better walking and cycling, infrastructure, and public transport to vastly reduce emissions. So the example you see on the right-hand side here, the Evening Standard article, was from Waltham Forest, where more than 20,000 people took place in a conversation on Commonplace that helped speed implementation of changes by creating a robust evidence base that meant that they could move faster with their proposals. And when the project had been implemented, a study found that 42,000 hours of additional human life will be created as a result just of the improved air quality of this one programme, not to speak of the reduced CO2 emissions as well. So these projects can have both very, very beneficial local effects, but also can contribute to more broadly to the climate adaptation and mitigation challenge. So at COP this week, we've launched a citywide ground-up conversation in Glasgow that's asking 2 questions. How could your neighbourhood meet your needs better? And how can it adapt to a future of a changing climate? So we've partnered with a couple of organisations in Glasgow, a really interesting sustainability management platform called oneplanet.com, to create this conversation, which has so far received over 21,000 people and I think 1,500 ideas. And this is just the start. This conversation is going to be going on for 6 months to a year. So this is an example of a derelict site that somebody suggested could be made into a rewilded space that for communities to use for various different things. And here are some of the other comments in vivid detail about other aspects of the city that the community would like to change. Now, the council's listening to these ideas actively and building them into the way that they're thinking about the climate mitigation for Glasgow, but the community is also self-organising around them. And we're very interested in this idea of creating a coalition of the willing, partly through technology, that members of the community can simply pick up and run with. And this is just looking at the breakdown of the ideas by kind of, or the responses by type and then by theme. And you can see that the top theme, if you like, is community spirit, which I think is really interesting in the time of climate change, that communities are prioritising the way that they work together. And this this project was featured on the BBC World Service today. A program called People Fixing the World, which is available on the website if you want to have a listen to it. And that actually you can hear some of the people talking about Glasgow and some of the people who participated in the heat map. And I'm presenting this project at the COP Green Zone on Thursday, which will be really interesting and exciting. So to finish, I think on a slightly more philosophical note, I believe very, very strongly that the challenges of our built environment, whether they relate to safety, to climate planning or transport, can be won from the bottom up as well as the top down. And using data that both tells stories, provides insights and creates a sense of purpose and of shared community priority for people about the place that they live, work or play, creates an extraordinary resource which councils and developers and infrastructure providers can benefit from hugely. So if you'd like to know more, please do drop me an email afterwards and I'll be very, very happy to show you, talk you through it and discuss how you might want to use it.
Thank you, Mike. Andrew, over to you.
Thanks. And I'd also like to thank Mike as well. So I have 2 daughters aged 6 and 9, and the park that they've acquired pretty recently in Camden, where we live, was being renovated, and they ran the consultation through Commonplace. And both my daughters responded to that. And I mean, it's definitely a little way to go in terms of how the council are engaging the users of the park, but I thought it was quite exciting that it was one of the few cases where they were actually able to get direct feedback from potential users of it, because my daughters are highly unlikely to turn up to a standard town hall meeting about planning, and so the ability to do that online in quite a visual, multiple choice way really caught them. So yeah, I was
Brilliant.
Happy to play with that. And in some ways, I think our little summaries are quite related in a way, in the sense that Commonplace and what Mike does is look at the pulling data on the qualitative aspects of place. I think we tend to look much more on the quantitative aspects. And so I run a company called Diagonal that I founded about a year ago with 3 of us, Claire, Gala and Simona. And we are a data science consultancy for the built environments. And the genesis of it is that we are all technologists, and we all feel that we have a debt to the city that we all live in cities. We've all drawn inspiration throughout our careers from cities, and we feel that we would like to, as technologists, somehow be able to contribute back to that environment and improve it, particularly at a time when cities are struggling with everything from climate change adaptation to public health crises such as obesity and adaptation to the post-COVID world. And a lot of those problems have their roots in the urban and built environments, and we need to be changing that environment and improving to mitigate those consequences much more quickly than we do at the moment. Now, the majority of those problems are real and involve slow, difficult, but ultimately critical public engagement. They involve steel and concrete. They don't, much of them aren't centered in algorithms and data science, but it's our speciality, and so that's the angle that we approach it from. So we're cognizant that we're only a small part of this space, but we want to bring our kind of skills to bear on some of these like multifaceted problems. And we think a lot of the time progress is stalled, not because of a lack of funding, to be honest, but a lack of commitment as to what the right thing to do is. And we think that's often because a city is a complex web of systems that interrelate, and when you change one, it has knock-on effects on the other. And you see this, the end result, this is vitriolic debates about where cycle lanes should be placed, for example, where there are no perfect solutions. You're going to change something, it's going to have consequences for future development. And we think that one of the barriers to that is because it is so slow and difficult to understand the impact of your changes, people don't explore them, and it's not possible for people to see the alternatives that are possible, or at least to fully understand the space that people who are changing the built environment are working in. If you're going to move people out of cars, then those cars have to be moved somewhere, and space be created for pedestrians and the like. There are no perfect solutions to that problem, and so really you need to be in a position where you can quickly explore potentially different solutions and bring people to a place of understanding. And I think our goal in using data science and exploring problems and producing visualization is not necessarily to highlight the one true algorithmically best solution, because I don't think that is possible. It is more to move people from a position of being staunchly opposed to change to a position where they feel, okay, I understand that the solution space for this problem is more complex than I initially expected. And so perhaps I should either stand back from this debate or get more involved and actually understand more, and hopefully use the kind of tools that we build to think about potentially different solutions to problems. So we conduct bespoke large-scale urban analyses for people involved in changing the built environment. And a lot of that work is for private clients and difficult to talk about, but it's probably easy. I'll show you a few pictures that will give you a flavor of the kind of analysis that we typically work on. If I do that, and you can see the screen. So this, for example, is looking at the impact of cycle lanes in parts of London. So London's, like many places, investing very heavily in segregated cycle infrastructure. And what's interesting is you end up with a new type of mobility where previously cycling in a city such as London was the domain of middle-aged men in lycra who are happy to ride in amongst quite dangerous traffic, into a world where actually providing you can ride on segregated kind of new safe cycling infrastructure a much more diverse set of people are willing to get involved. And so one of the things we've looked at in the past is how does that change the accessibility of buildings? So you see here in this area, kind of the light blue center is one particular building, and that's the set of buildings you can reach by walking from that building within 15 minutes, which is typically seen as a good upper bound on how far people are willing to walk for shorter trips. And then dark blue is where you can get to either walking or riding on very specifically segregated, purpose-built cycling infrastructure. And obviously that has quite interesting knock-on effects for where this infrastructure should be placed, but also on what type of development should happen in various bits of the city. That's the example of it, like a small scale analysis. We can go to a kind of a larger scale analysis than that. So if we go to this, for example, this is the same kind of computation we did, but at a building level. So here for every single building in London, we've worked out how many amenities, how many schools, libraries, supermarkets can you reach from this building in a 15-minute walk, with dark red being areas where there's a very easy set of amenities you can reach, and then lighter blue being not. And so obviously the high streets get picked out in that case. But there are it's a good way of pointing of where development should be promoted. We don't just do kind of transportation infrastructure analysis. We also worked with a company that specializes in pedestrianization and pedestrian wayfinding. And so in particular, how can you change the built environment to make it easier for people to walk to places? And therefore shift people away from car-centric walking and the high carbon impact there into active travel. And with years of experience, one thing that they've realized is they think a lot about the legibility of a city, which is how easy is it for people to understand and relate to their environments. And one of the key factors to that is effectively like the visible sightline from a particular point. So the diversity and range of buildings and pieces of the built environment you can see from a point. The more different things you can see and the more varied those things are, the easier it is for you to relate yourself to that place and be able to navigate through it confidently. And in some areas, you know, with kind of well-known landmarks and the like, and quite kind of visually prominent buildings or pieces of infrastructure, you don't need much support. But in other areas where there perhaps isn't such natural supports, then you need to actually bring in artificial wayfinding supports in everything from simple signage, but also to placing green walls along a street or putting a kind of a green corridor of parklets and the like around to kind of externally support the ability of people to kind of wayfind through an area. And so we did some work with them for particular points in the city, work out how, you know, what can you see from there? How easy is it for you to relate yourself to that area? But then compute that at scale for full areas that we can see here, where it's the colors of this map here. Dark red are areas where there is a place that's highly legible because of the natural things you can see within the built environment, whereas the light blue areas aren't the case. And so as you think about routing people through those spaces, this kind of data allows them to work out where do we need to actually invest in putting in wayfinding supports to make areas deliberately more legible. So those are kind of the types of projects that we typically get involved in. So we partner quite deeply on any problems that deal with perhaps data that is either too large for internal teams to handle with, or potentially too sensitive. So we make use of privacy preserving technologies to run analysis on data that would perhaps otherwise be difficult to do due to the sensitivities of revealing individual identities. We also put quite a significant emphasis on sustainability as a business with quite a wide remit. I mean, obviously, a lot of the projects that we take on are helping cities respond to the move to active transport and low carbon and lifestyles. But equally, as a business, as our effect on the built environment is important. And I think since we're talking about the Franco-British Data Society, I thought I'd tangentially relate this back to France in some way by a piece of urban infrastructure that's always been quite an inspiration to us, which is the Richard Rogers' famous Centre Pompidou in Paris, which is a remarkable building for a number of reasons. Firstly, it was built by or designed at a time by an unknown British architecture practice who'd never taken on a large-scale project, but just happened to win a blind competition to build this incredibly critical piece of civic infrastructure in the middle of Paris, which was quite surprising. The second surprising thing is that the building only uses half of the site. It's a huge site, and they deliberately said, we're only going to build on half of it because we're going to leave the other half open to the public as a new public space, which, when you think if anybody involved in the dynamics of real estate funding and property, the idea of having a site and then just not building on half of it is quite a bold move. But perhaps the thing that speaks to us most about it is the inside out nature of the building, which was the original concept was to improve sustainability. That Rogers and his practice idea was that if a building is to be sustainable, it has to have a lifespan of 100 years or more, which means existing for beyond the life of its current occupants. And so how do you build a building which is suited to be adaptable beyond its current life? Because obviously the largest waste of carbon would be knocking that building down and building something new. And hence that's why you have all of the surfaces on the outside of the building, and a very complex, you can see here the kind of white grid around it, the very complicated cantilevered approach to hold up the floors of the building so that the floors themselves are completely open with no structures in the way, such that if it ever changes purpose, the building is putting the fewest constraints on your plans for its future as possible. And that's kind of inspirational in the sense of when you think about sustainability and the impact of technology on the built environment. I mean, you have fantastic examples like Commonplace and Mike, but I think a lot about the impact of the likes of Uber and Deliveroo and the like that have real meaningful impact on the built environment in the way that Deliveroo moves consumers away from active high streets with restaurants to gig economy workers delivering food from dark kitchens that don't contribute to the rest of society, all the while not generating any money and not being able to turn a profit. And they're in a situation of burning venture capital in order to acquire the market. And to me, that's the definition of not sustainable. You are indirectly causing an impact on the built environment that will outlast the effect of your business. And so we tried to guard against that by building into the legal structure of our company this idea that not only are we committed to building technology in a responsible manner with clear definitions of what we mean around that, but we are committed to the ownership of the company staying within the company long time. and having an external third party, not-for-profit, overseeing that we agree to those terms with veto rights on anything we do as in the legal structure of the company, which we hope will protect ourselves and the long-term viability of the company, even beyond the current members of staff within it. So with that, if anybody needs to urban data analyzed or wants to know more about us, you can certainly just give us an email at hello@diagonal.works.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much. Stuart, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. I want to take a different approach on the discussion and just run through what Violia's strategy has been on data, why we need a strategy, what we've been doing, and where we're kind of heading. So I'll just share my screen a second. So, you know, for an organisation like Veolia, you know, one of the main reasons we have a data strategy is, yes, you know, you can read the literature out there and why companies are putting such large emphasis on data. But for me as a CIO, the biggest sort of reason we have such an emphasis on data is it actually drives the backbone of our IT strategy. Everything we bring in terms of applications, software, some of the innovation that we introduce as well, all has to be on the premise that it enriches the data that we have as an organization and improves us as a business. Because in my opinion, you know, the software and the solutions we deliver our customers are one thing, but it's the data and the decision making that will differentiate us from our competitors. So what have we been doing? I suppose the main sort of building block has been the cloud enabled data platform that we've created over the last sort of 3 to 5 years. We were quite early adopters in the Azure cloud. We've been working very closely with Microsoft in terms of using cloud functions. All that means, really, without going into the technicalities of it, is we can ingest data from absolutely any source, whether that's our own systems or third parties or from devices and sensors that we put out there as well. We've had that platform assessed, and you know, as one of the things to reassure Veolia and the investment we've put into that platform is, you know, we are quite leading edge in regards to, you know, third-party assessment and what we're doing there. So we're extremely proud of where we are and what we've done with that. But that's allowed us to then invest in a you know, a world-class data and analytics team. We've got thousands of internal users accessing the data on a daily basis. We have over 55,000 customers accessing the data because we're now producing it for our customers as well. We've got way over 700 reports. So you know, we are literally pushing the boundaries of what we can do with this technology. I think one of the newer, or you know, in the last few years, we've moved more into capturing data or using IoT to capture data from sources that we wouldn't ordinarily have access to. So this is about using sensors and technology to capture data that's not within our systems, and we wouldn't have been able to capture it before. So some of the projects we've been doing is, you know, we've put sensors in bins on the streets, you know, to determine, you know, combined with footfall traffic, where public bins should be. You know, for example, we were working with one of the local authorities to understand where you would put litter bins in the street outside of, say, McDonald's or a KFC or fast food restaurant. You know, ordinarily isn't the first bin that's filled up outside of those establishments. It's like the second or third bin after the consumers ate the product. So, you know, using the data and the analysis that we can provide, we then can help with, you know, local authorities move their infrastructure around. Yes, it's largely waste based on what we've been doing, but we are moving into the other areas of what Veolia offers, and energy and water are parts of our service offering as well. So district heating, with in Hell Village, we have a fully established IoT platform that monitors the usage of the residents and helps us determine levels of energy for those buildings, but then generates automatically the invoicing, etc. as well. So again, using cloud technology to help us with that. In terms of air quality, we've got sensors out there today that are measuring air quality, and we're in the early stages of combining all of that data with other third-party sources as well to help us predict certain movements in air quality, or provide analysis to local authorities as well. ERF is energy recovery facilities. These are our sites where we take waste and burn it, then produce energy from that process. But we also put the electricity back to the grid, and we have a lot of prediction models around that, because waste isn't like coal, where it has the same calorific value. Therefore, it's easy to burn and predict. Waste is unpredictable, and therefore, our energy outputs as well can be affected by that. So we have some forecasting and prediction tools that allow us to be able to work with the grid and ensure that what we forecast is pretty accurate to within a very small sort of 2-3% of accuracy. So it takes into account third-party data. We built models that machine learn around weather changes, snowing or cold weather snaps as well. We've also hooked up sensors to our fleet. We have a large fleet here in the UK, about 5,000 vehicles. It's one of the largest fleets in the UK, and we are one of the first ones to hook into the telematics of that fleet to help us work with the manufacturers in improving and helping to improve the fleet, but also to help us and our workshop staff also keep that fleet available at all times, and again reducing our need to hire in vehicles. If a vehicle goes off for being broken down and things like that, we are now predicting when those vehicles are likely to need maintenance. We've also taken all of that data and we've built some really cool models around prediction, particularly in terms of customers. We have 50 odd metrics going into a model that allows us to predict the propensity of a customer to leave us. We have electricity forecasting, as I talked about, and we've also started we have been previously bringing third-party data in to help us. For example, on street cleansing services, we take third-party data around, from the TfL network, whether that's the buses or the tubes, to understand footfall in a certain area, and do we clean the street afterwards, after those sort of periods of busyness as well. So that helps us provide a dynamic service to fluctuate with the sort of the footfall on site. But again, we're using data and prediction to do all of that. I'd say at the beginning of the course, there's definitely stages of where we are. We've moved from descriptive, we're in the predictive element now, and I think the end goal for us is to get to that prescriptive stage where the data is automatically telling us what we should do in certain certain situations. So that's where we want to get to. I'd say we're heavily moving in the predictive stage, but not quite there in prescriptive, but that's the end goal of where we want to get to. How are we going to get there? We have invested heavily in systems, and we'll continue to do that. IoT again is another area where we can enrich our data from our systems and our customers today with data that, as I said, to capture that we have never had access to. Bin sensors are a great example of that. you put a sensor in a bin and you can tell the fill level. There's nothing out there today that allows us to do that without a sensor. So that's the kind of data we're chasing. And then eventually we want to move to natural language querying. It's already enabled for our customers. So our customers today can ask questions of the data in dynamic real time, like you do to a chatbot. You can ask, how many tons did I recycle if you're a customer? Where did my waste go, etc. And it will build the charts. You can say, where did my waste go over the last 12 months by line chart, bar chart, pie chart. All of that's then built on the fly for our customers. It was easy for customers. It's a lot harder internally because I have to correlate, or I have to sort of build synonyms against all of what we call our data internally. People have different names for certain things. So that's something we're working on at the moment, building this library of synonyms to allow us to do that. So that's a quick fire overview of what we've been doing here in Veolia. So I'll hand back to you.
Thank you to all the speakers, and I'm sure everyone will join me in my thanks to the panelists. We have a few questions coming from the floor. The first one is a question for Mike, and does his platform access different populations than on-site meeting or other tools?
Very good question. Yes, the short answer, it does. I think any of us who has been to a local meeting that's anything relating to planning or discussions about kind of local assets will probably know that there's a very usually kind of older, usually more middle class group of people who attend those meetings. And so technology has a fantastic opportunity to reach completely different types of people. Like Andrew's daughters, for example, and we certainly find that younger age groups respond much more readily via Commonplace than they would ever consider going to a kind of face-to-face meeting. We're also really interested in different communities in London and how we reach them. We're actively working on different ways to reach them. We have recently launched a multilingual capability for Commonplace, so you can translate it into different languages, and that's something that we've done partly with different markets in mind, but partly also with different communities in the UK in mind, and I think that's going to be really important. So it definitely does already, but it's an active area of research and development for us to improve the way that we can reach much more deeply into some of those communities.
And we have a question which is addressed to all the speakers, which relates to sustainability, and asks whether you have concerns that whilst you're trying to have a positive impact, you're also building platforms which need electricity and produce CO2. I don't know which one of you would like to have a go at that question.
I don't know from my point of view. Obviously technology is massively moved on, and using the public cloud is definitely more efficient than building this on premise. The amount of compute power you would need, the benefit of what we're doing in terms of taking the data and making better decisions. Generally for Veolia, we do have a lot of algorithms and models that allow us to reduce our carbon footprint, in terms of vehicle movements, etc. That's only possible using the compute power we get with the public cloud. If we were to have similar on premise as we used to, it would far exceed what we're doing in the public cloud. So yes, it does use electricity, but the benefit of what we're doing far outweighs that, and it's better than the alternative, which is to build it on premise.
And Andrew, I think you
say roughly the same thing, that the research in some pieces of computation that are incredibly compute heavy and hence electricity and CO2 heavy, but certainly not in anything that we do. And the total financial cost, let alone the environmental cost of the compute we use, is vanishingly small compared to the value of the work that we obtain. But it's definitely a question you have to ask, for example, with any companies working in, for example, blockchain-based technologies, where the burning of electricity is a key part of the way that architecture is designed. But for simple analysis, it's not a problem.
Thank you. And as with the Franco-British Society, I wondered if I can have your comments on to what extent your projects are similar projects in France or more widely in Europe.
I'm happy to kick off on that one. Actually, I realised that one of the comments that I showed you on the Glasgow project was inspired by the Chemin de Fer de Petite Ceinture in Paris, which is a community. Well, my understanding of it is a kind of 19-mile long disused railway, and there has been a very, very strong community movement about reinvigorating it as a place for all sorts of different things to happen. And I believe it's now, I've never actually been there myself, but I believe it's a real kind of attraction for not only the communities that are using it, but also for tourists and so on. So I think there's obviously some very, very active communities working together on transforming parts of the city in Paris, which is really, really exciting and not new. You know, that's my understanding is that's been going on for 20 years. So these aren't new things. I think what we're trying to do is to use technology to learn and replicate, and in some cases speed up what can be done.
Yeah, for Veolia, obviously Veolia is French based. Our parent company is based in France. So absolutely everything we do is in collaboration with the other entities across the world, in particular Paris or France, I should say, as well. So yes, that's when we get the biggest benefit, is when we collaborate across our different business units and regions.
We haven't had a chance to do any analysis for clients in France as yet, which is a shame, because obviously with Angel Dargo and the like, there's a lot of really bold reform work going on in that space. But we do have a number of technical collaborators in France, actually, including some of the leading researchers in homomorphic encryption. Pascal Paillet is based in Paris at a startup that we collaborate with occasionally, and that is a way of not only encrypting data so that people can't, so that attackers can't see it, but also actually using that data in its encrypted form so that you can produce useful analyses on data without ever decrypting that data. And that's an incredibly useful technique if you are working with sensitive data sets where the data is so sensitive that you want to minimize the number of people who look at it. And those kind of techniques unlock analyses that previously weren't possible. And so we work with people on those kind of techniques.
Thank you. We're getting very close to 3 o'clock, and we promised to finish bang on time. There are other questions from the panel, for the panel, and the panel members very kindly gave you their contact details at the beginning if you have other additional questions to ask. But at this stage, I think it's unless there are comments from the chairman, Michael.
No, I don't have. Just even though I was one of the people organising this, I was surprised just how interesting it all was. It was absolutely fascinating, and I congratulate you, Andrew, for actually putting up a map which showed my house on it.
That was specially planned, obviously.
In Islington. So no, just a very warm thank you to everyone for your participation. Really, really excellent event. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all of you who attended as well.